Welcome to the Voice of San Diego. It's the Friday 5, live at 5, Voice of San Diego at Home special edition. Friday 5, live at 5. We got our number 5, or our 5 stories to look at this week. 5 stories that we are following. Number 1, I don't know how there's anything bigger for the Voice of San Diego audience than this drama about 101 Ash Street. It's right there, right over there. Here, let's see. That's it. 101 Ash Street. I've got a view of the drama right here. It's just a building. It's just a building, but it's consumed San Diego politics. Nice respite from the catastrophe of civilization all around us. Number 1 story is that we have now been able to tell, we can decide conclusively that alleged footnote 15 is no longer alleged footnote 15. It's forged footnote 15, triple F, forged footnote 15. Just a reminder, what is footnote 15? If you're having trouble following this, that's fine. Put your comments, your questions in there. I want to watch the Padres tonight. I'm going to try to get through this quick. Got a lot of work to do. Like my sweater, it gets cold in this office. Got my sweater on. We came back to the office this week. 2 pods. Half of Voice of San Diego can come here one week. The other half can come the other week. I'm going to name our pod something cool, something great. Get a good name for it. Back to the story. 101 Ash Street. This is footnote 15. Last week, in this story, NBC San Diego reported that they had a new rationale that they had come across about why the city of San Diego leased to own this building, and instead of actually purchasing it. Why did it lease to own instead of purchase it? And NBC's main point of its story was that part of the reason they did that was because an appraisal for it had come in too low. Thus, they couldn't get financing for it. And thus, they needed to make something else happen, something creative happen. They needed to, in essence, the story implied they needed to deceive people, kind of rush this through, kind of otherwise do machinations to get this through. And in that story was this footnote that implied that Todd Gloria was a part of that effort. Mr. Gloria had previously been skeptical about the lease to own structure when it was used for a prior acquisition, but was supportive of it, and that a discussion with him privately had kind of brought him aboard, and he was ready to push it. It was a heavy implication of impropriety, of fraudulent behavior. Didn't really connect the dots, but definite implied. It got his name into the headline. It was a big deal. It was our number 1 story last week. It's our number 1 story this week because yesterday, Thursday, NBC completely retracted the story, or at least that part about Todd Gloria, and said a couple of really interesting things. One, that they had gotten this report from an anonymous source. They don't know who sent it to them. But as journalists are supposed to do, they had tried to verify it from a source in the city, in City Hall, and that source told them it was real, but then later admitted that they were mistaken. There was a miscommunication. And so that's what led them to retract the story. Todd Gloria today did a press conference on the Zoom. That's how we do things now. And he said, someone stood to benefit from this. Someone stood to benefit from duping the reporter. He called on Barbara Bree, his opponent in the race. He said, While we don't know who's at the center of this, what we do know is that my opponent ran paid Facebook ads using this story. Moments after it was published, she paid to reach hundreds of thousands of San Diegans to communicate a falsehood, knowing that the source of NBC's 7 story had been contested. Just an incredible moment in local politics. They call this silly season. This was silly to the extreme. Never heard of a forged document making its way into the mayor's race like this. Fascinating development, the retraction, and more. I highly recommend the podcast that Andy Keats, Sarah Libby, and I recorded yesterday, the Voice of San Diego podcast. We talk a lot about the journalism ethics involved, the background of this story. But let's go through a couple of things. Some things people don't quite understand sometimes. When you have a journalistic story, often you have to run corrections. We run corrections all the time. I don't know, once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. It's not a big deal. We're the first draft of history. You make mistakes. You want to minimize them. Nobody wants corrections. It's bad. You got to get better at it. You got to sometimes counsel people to get better at it. I run corrections, run things fast. It's fine. You can work it out. In fact, the hallmark of a good journalistic entity, as opposed to, say, fake news, is an entity that will run corrections because they care about their integrity. A correction, though, means that the story has gone up and the story stands. The story is still relevant. It's still interesting and important, but there's a fact that is mistaken in it and needs to be corrected. That's a correction. A retraction is where the meat of the story, the actual truth of the story, is pulled back, is corrected, it no longer serves the public interest to be up. Sorry about that. I've got it even plugged into the hard cable. Sorry about that. A retraction means it no longer serves the public to even be up. It is the most serious consequence, negative consequence of a journalistic investigative story in that journalist situation. It is the worst thing you can go through as an investigative journalist, other than the consequences from it, which often can be very severe for your career. So this is not light. This is a big deal. There's a number of questions that still come up. Who forged the document? Where are these reports? NBC said in its retraction that it has obtained the full report. Why can't we see the full report? Whether it's from NBC or from the city can, as we were told this week by Amy Fawcett, the chief of staff of Mayor Kevin Faulconer, that report is something the city council could decide to waive its privilege of and release. Let's do that. Let's get after that. We want to see it, this report, and compare it to what has come out about it already. We want to review these things. Lots going on. Alleged footnote 15 is now forged footnote number 15, and a lot of people are in trouble. It's a big deal. Now, what was Todd Gloria referring to? Yes, pulled up the stats to say Facebook has a wonderful online database. You can search to see what ads are running, political ads. Barbara Bree did run an ad for a week starting September 3rd. September 2nd looks like she may have modified an earlier ad. September 3rd through yesterday, an ad promoting that story along with some aspersions on Todd Gloria. So that is a major story in the mayor's race, one to keep following. Highly recommend the podcast if you're interested in digging deeper about the journalistic ethics involved and the dilemma that they must be facing. Now, there's one thing about this retraction that's really interesting. They had said that they got the report from a reliable source, but the retraction says that they got the report from an anonymous source that they didn't know about, and that they confirmed it from a reliable source. Those are two very different things that I think we have to reconcile before this drama is put to rest. Highly recommend the podcast. Check it out. Let's go to our second story. Number 2 for the week. What was number 2 again, Megan? Here we go. Number 2 for the week. This one, Hightower. So, principal at Hancock Elementary School sent out to teachers or to parents this warning that families who have school-age children at home and have not provided the school with an affidavit of proof of an accredited homeschool program, that is, if they're not going to school, would be subject to investigations from child welfare services. This whole note she sent home to parents: it is illegal to keep your child at home without proper homeschool curriculum. Our staffing is completely dependent on opening of school, on school enrollment happening. If parents attempt to enroll at a later date when schools begin to reopen, we may not have room. And if you don't do a proper homeschool program for your child, we're calling child welfare services. Woo! I don't know about you, but if you have school-age kids, you probably have friends who are doing the same things that we're seeing, which is that dozens of kids aren't going to school. They're doing homeschool programs. There was one I heard about, Blossoms and Roots. There's a few other programs. I think a lot of people are doing their own thing at home, if they have especially a stay-at-home parent. And I'm not sure that they're going through the process of unenrolling their kids, which in normal times, if you don't go to school, can trigger some truancy laws, can trigger some real consequences. And but just to be clear, our reporter Will Huntsberry debunked some of these points that this principal had made. First of all, you just have to let the state know that you're doing this. You don't have to let the individual school know. And the school has to take you whenever you want to go to school. Whenever your kid wants to go to school, your neighborhood school has to take you. Now, if for some reason they're at capacity, then they'll put you in another one. But there's no you have to be in there now if you ever want to go back to school. So just another point about how bananas this enrollment situation is for these school districts. Will Huntsberry did a great piece, The Learning Curve, this week about this situation. San Diego Unified, LA Unified are very concerned about how many kids aren't being enrolled right now in kindergarten, how many kids are doing this sort of separate thing or just staying out of school, or how many kids just simply aren't logging in. And that could present some enormous financial consequences. Remember, schools get money traditionally in California based on how many kids are at the school, how many students are at the school. In San Diego, it turns out to be about $10,000 per kid. And so if a kid chooses a charter school or chooses a homeschool or chooses a private school, that money doesn't come to the school. And so they're very concerned that when that system gets kicked back in place, because they got a reprieve this year, they don't have to do it that way this year because of all this emergency stuff that's going on. They just said, whatever you had last year, you'll get this year. But when that system kicks back into place, if there is a real emergency of enrollment, that could have a vast economic consequence for a place like San Diego Unified. I also wanted to highlight a story today from the Associated Press and Chalkbeat. Chalkbeat's a national nonprofit news organization that covers education. It said districts where the vast majority of students are white are more than 3 times as likely as school districts that enroll mostly students of color to be open for some in-person learning, according to an analysis by the Associated Press and Chalkbeat. More than 3 times as likely as school districts that enroll mostly students of color to be open for in-person learning. Now, they cited a couple reasons for this. There are polls that show that people of color are more concerned in some cases about the virus than white people. But there's also a question of equity and resources, where they have the resources to provide the smaller classes, the adaptations that are happening. And there's also a correlation with Trump support. If you support Trump, your county is more likely to have schools that are open for in-person learning. So obviously that correlates with some big cities that are keeping the schools closed. There's only one big city school district that is going to be open soon for in-person learning, and that is New York City. So fascinating dynamic playing out there. We are very interested in learning more about some of these dynamics. I'll answer some questions after this. Let's go on to our third story of the night, the Friday Five, live at 5. Sedition. Our intern, Kate Nucci, finished her term as an intern this week with a great final day. You can't really hope for a better final day as an intern than the one she had. And that was the Public Safety Committee of the San Diego City Council basically took her story and said, this 102-year-old law that polices seditious language in San Diego needs to be changed, needs to be adjusted. Now, it'd be one thing if it was just an old law that was on the books that needed to be cleaned up. There's a lot of those, like you can't, goats can't walk with cows down the street kind of thing in some places. There's some dumb old laws because of how people were a little bit weird in the old days, right? Well, this isn't just that. What Kate had found when she started looking through police records and tickets in San Diego was that 83 tickets since 2013 had been given to people for use of so-called seditious language. And it looked like a disproportionate number of those went to people of color, Black people, and that these are hard to challenge. They're tickets, they're infractions, they're not misdemeanors, so you're not necessarily going to court for them and such. And they were clearly unconstitutional. You can't ticket somebody because you don't like what they said. But in fact, that had been happening. Now, Kate did a great story this week. She followed up with some of the people who had gotten some of these tickets like this for using seditious language, profanity, seditious language. There it is, right there. She'd followed up with some of the people who did that and talked, and one of them had been leaving a bar in Pacific Beach, yelled at a car, and the cop pulled him aside and said, "You can't say those things. You are seditious." You imagine that? You're seditious. Now, the law, 102 years old, was put in place during World War I when people were worried about German agents in this country working on behalf of the Kaiser. That's what the origin of this law was. So they were using it to punish people, and often people who said things rude to the police themselves. And when one of them described how a police officer didn't know what to do, was upset with what this person had done, and called the superior, and the superior said, "Give him a seditious language ticket." So that was our first indication we had that this was something that the police officers and their management were actually trying to make sure, was punished. So huge story there. Great result. The Public Safety Committee of the San Diego City Council decided that they want to see that changed. They put forward a change, going to the city council for a change. City attorney put out a press release saying, "Voice San Diego did this investigation. This is unconstitutional. We're pulling it out." Never once mentioning that 83 times since 2013 it's been employed. It's not just some relic they're cleaning up. It has been employed. It's unconstitutional, kind of without a doubt. And thus, there's no indication of what would happen to the 83 tickets that were already out there. All right, our number 4 story of the evening, Friday 5, live at 5. Metropolitan Correctional Center downtown has seen a surge in recent weeks in COVID-19. If you were to build a place where COVID could spread, you would build this building. It now has one of the highest number of active cases of any federal Bureau of Prisons facility in the country. As of Thursday, there were 129 active coronavirus cases among people incarcerated in the facility and 140 recovered cases. There are 12 active staff cases and 1 staff member who has recovered. The outbreak it came in one single housing unit and nearly tripled from 44 active cases 2 weeks ago to 160 this week. It's horrifying. And there's a lot of people saying like, well, they're prisoners, whatever. Look, you can't punish people with viruses. And there are plenty of other people who work there, public servants, who need to be protected. It's just a horrifying story out of central San Diego. Maya Christian has been following it. Our most vulnerable populations packed together where this is spreading rampantly. That's our number 4 story of the week. And our number 5 story of the week. KPBS did a great story there. My friend Claire Tregeser. San Diego beaches, parks, and restaurants are open, but playgrounds remain closed. She found out there is no guidance available of any kind for when playgrounds themselves will be allowed to be open. You can go to a bar, a restaurant bar. Most of the bars, like in Ocean Beach, are restaurant/bars. They're open. You can go to, some schools. You can go to, but you can't go to a playground. What we're finding out about this virus is that the way it spreads is usually in a home or in an enclosed area through the air, through aerosols, where you're spending time right next to somebody in a badly ventilated area. The surface transmission has been minimal. And when it's under UV light, it gets baked, it gets fried. Little bugs can't handle the sun. Grow up, bugs. Get some sunscreen, bugs. Well, no. Let the sun roast you. We don't care about you. We want you to die. And that's what happens. And yet we cannot even envision in California a time when those will be open. It's crazy. It's so weird. Claire did a great story about it. Today, Lorena Gonzalez wrote a letter to Governor Newsom saying, when are we going to get some guidance on when you can open these playgrounds? Often it's the only place that some of my families can go to. They don't have backyards. Get on it. At least tell us when they could open. Maybe we rename them restaurants and then they can open. Hot Ronts. Sorry, that was terrible. Hot restaurants. Great story by Claire. I love her conversational sort of style on it. She's been on a little bit on that childcare beat. There's a childcare crisis, school crisis. Love everybody who's focusing on it. All right, let me see if you guys have anything interesting to say, and we can go through it. Yes, oh, my buddy Kim Prather. I got the Rockstar Scripps virus in the air. Scientists following Voice of San Diego at home. Kim Prather, former star of it. Yes, it's crazy to keep the playgrounds closed. It is not closed. It is not spread on surfaces. That's a scientist right there. That person is to be listened to. Kim Prather. The virus is in the air. It's spread in the air. Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Kim Prather. Thank you. You've taught me a lot. We can go to places outside. We were having increased economic activity. The streets were alive, unlike they ever have been. We didn't need to open things more inside until we could get schools open. As Kim says, go outside. If you have to be inside, have great ventilation and wear masks, and you can do things. You can do things. Have great ventilation and clean the air, right, Kim? Clean the air. Clean the air. Do things outside. Clean the air when you have to be inside. Wear a mask when you're there. We can open when we do those things. That's right. That's right. That's this. And that's the other thing. Yeah, don't go to like a choir practice in a poorly ventilated like church basement. Don't do that. Let's not do that. But the kids are going to hug each other on the playground again. Well, maybe don't let them do that. But it's not, even when you're next to somebody, it's like this sustained contact, like being right next to each other all the time. Like it's not a hug, necessarily one hug. It's like a loud, screaming at each other within a poorly ventilated area. But yeah, they probably shouldn't be hugging people. Yeah, for a long time. This is great. Kim, we should just have a standing appointment once every 10 days or whatever. You come on and you scientists explain everybody on how this all works. Yeah, put on the hug. Yeah, put on the mask and turn the face away. That's right. There's a way to do this. There's a way to live with this threat. That's what we're preaching. We're going to have it for a while. Let's figure out the best life we can live while we have it. All right, I got some work to do tonight. I got the Padres game. Go Pods. Best team in baseball. Should we talk about that for a second? How great are the San Diego Padres? Remember when they used to lose to teams like the San Diego Padres? Just got crushed all the time. Now they just crush all the time. It's beautiful. Kim is awesome. You are, and love Voice of San Diego. Say it. Leadership needs to get a clue. Kids need a place to be with other kids. Playgrounds, open spaces, managed well. Totally. Totally. Do it outside. Giants, yeah, they're playing the Giants tonight. You're not a Giants fan, are you, Kim? Yeah. I have to rethink this. Rethink this friendship. All right, guys, go Padres. Tonight, I think... who's pitching tonight? We got Lamet. Got Lamet tonight? I think we've got Lamet tonight. I think he's up for the Cy Young. Oh, you were kidding. Right, exactly. Great joke. I think Lamet could win the Cy Young. All right, let's go watch San Diego Padres and Lamet. Love you all. Take care of yourself. Try to get some sun this weekend. Try to get some rest. Take care of your family. I know we're all going through a lot of different things. Love you. And we will talk. Oh, she's a Giants fan. Oh my God. Fine, I'll deal with it. My friend named their new dog Dodger. What? I can't like that dog. I mean, I'm not one of these guys. I hate the dog. It's fine, but I don't like the dog. Right, Dwayne? Lamet's got a chance to win the Cy Young. I agree. No, we're fine, Kim. We're fine. We're fine, Kim. Go Padres. All right, guys. Have a good weekend. Love you, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday. Got more to talk about. I highly recommend that podcast we did if you really want to get into one-on-one Ash Street and some of this drama. Have a good weekend.